Welcome to Elselah Books Podcast. Today we are doing something a little different. We're taking a deep dive into a text that is, well, on the surface, it's a blueprint for a specific season of the year. But honestly, when you read it, it feels more like a manual for a total mindset shift. Almost a psychological operating system for, handling grief, discipline, and renewal.
I agree.
We're looking at a handbook for the disciplines of Lent.
And it is a fascinating document. This particular version is a revised edition of Reverend Thomas L. Weitzel's work.
Okay.
And it's been adapted by Christopher Porter specifically for Lutheran worship. So you'll see references to the Lutheran Book of Worship and the Lutheran Service Book.
Right.
But even if you aren't part of that tradition, the mechanics of what this handbook describes are, I think, incredibly relevant to anyone interested in human behavior, maybe habit formation.
Oh, completely. And I think for a lot of people, maybe even some of you listening right now, the word Lent just triggers thoughts of, okay, I guess I can't eat chocolate for a few weeks.
Right, time to eat fish on Fridays.
Exactly. It just feels like a diet with a spiritual label, or just a time to be sort of vaguely miserable. But what I love about this handbook is that it completely flips that script.
It really does.
It presents Lent not as this time of deprivation for the sake of suffering, but as this structured, almost athletic training period for the soul.
That's a perfect way to put it. The text uses the word discipline very intentionally. It draws this parallel to how a parent disciplines a child, not to be mean, but to bring them to freedom. Or, how an athlete accepts discipline to perform better.
If you want to run a marathon, you don't just show up and run. You need a regimen.
Exactly. And so the mission of this deep dive is to really unpack the why and the how that we find in this handbook, to move beyond the surface level and understand the ancient mechanics of what the text calls penitential reflection.
So let's unpack this, starting with the basics, the word itself. I was actually surprised by this little fun fact right at the beginning of the text. The word Lent doesn't actually mean fasting or sadness.
No, it doesn't. Not at all. The handbook points out that Lent comes from the Old English word lengthen, which literally means lengthen. It's a direct reference to the season of spring.
Which makes sense physically, right? The days are getting longer.
Precisely. But the text leans right into the metaphor. Just as the days are physically lengthening and the earth is seeing a rebirth of plants and flowers, which is, a messy, muddy process of pushing through dirt, the church views Lent as a time for spiritual lengthening, a springtime for the soul.
So it's about growth, not just cutting things out.
It's about growth. It's about expansion.
That immediately changes the whole vibe, doesn't it? But we have to talk about the math. Because the handbook makes a big deal about the duration. It's 40 days. Everyone knows Lent is 40 days.
Right.
But if you actually pull out a calendar and count the days from Ash Wednesday to Easter, it's 46.
Yeah.
So did they just get the math wrong?
No, and this is a detail I absolutely love in the handbook. It clarifies that Sundays do not count.
I feel like that's the best loophole ever.
Well, it's not a loophole so much as a theological statement. The text explains that Sundays are viewed as little celebrations of the resurrection. Every Sunday is a mini Easter. So you don't fast on a feast day, you pause the discipline to celebrate, and then you get right back to it on Monday.
So it creates a rhythm.
A rhythm of tension and release, rather than just 40 days of grinding.
But the number 40 itself, that's not random. The text connects it to some pretty heavy hitters in history.
Oh, absolutely. 40 is the biblical number for testing and preparation. It connects you to three major events. First, you have Jesus spending 40 days in the wilderness.
Right, preparing for his ministry.
Then you have Moses, 40 days up on Mount Sinai, waiting to receive the law. And Elijah, fasting for 40 days on his way to Mount Horeb.
So when you participate in Lent, according to this, you're reenacting these huge historical moments of waiting and preparation. You're aligning your internal clock with this ancient archetype of the wilderness.
That is a great way to put it. And to help you step into that mindset, the handbook described how the physical environment of the church actually changes.
It's all about setting the mood.
Totally. The Alleluia and hymns of praise, they're completely removed from the service. They just stop.
It's like a soundtrack change in a movie. You know something's about to go down.
Exactly. And the paraments, those are the cloths on the altar. They turn to darker colors, usually purple. But the one that really stood out, I think, was the veiling.
Yeah, the text says that crosses and crucifixes are covered with veils. That seems so stark. Why would you hide the central symbol of the faith?
It's meant to be stark. The handbook explains the psychology behind it. The veils emphasize how sin separates humanity from God. The idea is that everything turns inward until the resurrection.
It's a visual fast.
It is a visual fast, not just a food fast. You're removing the visual cues of glory so that when they come back at Easter, they actually mean something again. You're resetting your sensory baseline.
Okay, so that's the what and the where. Let's get into the how. The handbook breaks down this discipline of Lent into 4 main parts, like a workout plan. And the first one is repentance.
Repentance is the foundation, and the text defines it as turning and reorienting toward God. But what I really appreciate here is that it doesn't just leave it as some vague concept.
No, it gives you tangible things to do.
It's not just feel bad about yourself.
Yes, and I loved the water bowl tip. This is such a specific practical detail. The text suggests you place a small bowl of water in your bedroom. Then, every morning when you wake up and every night before you sleep, you dip your fingers in it and make the sign of the cross.
It's a tactile habit trigger.
Yeah.
The book says repentance is really just returning to your baptism, remembering who you are. So instead of waking up and immediately checking your phone,
Which we all do.
you perform this small physical ritual that centers you. It's grounding.
It is. And it also talks about interpersonal stuff. It says if you have conflict or tension with someone, you need to resolve it. The text calls these tensions stumbling blocks to faith.
Which is often way harder than giving up chocolate.
Much harder.
You can't be right with God while you're holding a grudge against your neighbor. It forces the spiritual into the social.
Okay, so discipline number 2, prayer. The handbook describes this as a conversation, speaking, and listening. But it makes an interesting point about where that prayer comes from.
It anchors it in the Sunday Eucharist. The idea is that your private prayer during the week isn't just you alone in a room. It flows out of the community gathering on Sunday.
So it's connected.
It's connected, but again, the advice is very practical. It suggests using devotional aids.
I liked the math problem it gives you. It says, take a book of the Bible, divide the number of chapters by 40, and then just read that much every day.
It breaks a big task into manageable pieces,
Yeah.
so you don't get overwhelmed. The text also suggests using the Psalms or reading the Sermon on the Mount. The goal is to have a consistent time and a quiet place. It even mentions using a candle or a cross to create a specific atmosphere for that conversation.
It's about creating a container for the experience.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the big one, the one everyone knows, fasting and abstinence. Discipline 3. The definition here is really key. It says, fasting is designed to strengthen the spiritual life by weakening one's attractions to pleasures of the senses.
That's a crucial distinction. It's not punishment. It's about detachment.
Okay?
If you're constantly satisfying every single craving, you lose your spiritual edge. You get soft. The handbook notes that Fridays are historically special days for this, often giving up meat.
But it's not just food anymore, is it? The handbook explicitly mentions screen time, abstaining from the internet, social media, TV.
Which, in the modern world, might be a more difficult fast than food for many people. But the text says the purpose of giving these things up is to free up time for prayer. That's the key. You don't just create a void. You have to fill it with something else.
Right. If you just stop watching TV but then stare at the wall, you've missed the point.
You've missed the point.
Now, we need to clarify the rules because the text is very specific about exemptions.
Yes, and this shows the balance. It's not a blanket rule. It explicitly states that children under 16, people over 65, those who are ill, pregnant women, and travelers are all excused from fasting.
And it also says water is never given up in a fast.
It's rigorous, but it's not meant to be dangerous. It's training, not torture.
Which leads us right to the 4th discipline, works of love. This is the active side. You've done the internal work, the repentance, prayer, fasting. Now you have to go outward.
This is where it quotes Matthew 25.4. As you do it for the least of these, you do it for me. It suggests things like visiting shut-ins, so people who can't leave their homes, or helping at a food pantry.
Or even just doing something nice for someone once a week. It sounds so simple, but if you actually schedule it, if you write down Tuesday, do something nice, it really changes your week.
And it shifts the focus from what am I giving up to what am I giving. It balances the inward reflection with outward action, so you don't become self-absorbed in your own piety.
Now, what's fascinating is that this handbook isn't just a list of ideas. It provides literal tools. There is a Lenten discipline worksheet included.
I think this is brilliant. It asks you to literally write down your plan for all 4 areas: repentance, prayer, fasting, and works of love.
You're making a contract with yourself.
Yes, it treats spiritual growth like a project that needs a plan. You aren't just winging it, you are making a commitment.
And speaking of tools, we have to talk about the sign of the cross. The handbook has a whole section on this. It calls it a sign of allegiance.
It connects it all the way back to the early Christians in the 2nd century. And the method described is specific. Touch the forehead, then the midsection, one shoulder, then the other.
And it says the order of the shoulders doesn't strictly matter, which I thought was interesting.
Right. It's a bodily marker of who you belong to, a physical anchor.
Okay, but then we get to the part that might intimidate some people. Private confession. This is where things get real. Why is this in here?
Well, the handbook addresses that fear directly. It quotes Martin Luther, calling private confession a precious and comforting treasure. The idea isn't to shame you.
It's a release valve.
Exactly. It's meant to strengthen and console the conscience.
But what do you actually say? I think that's the fear. People don't have the script. It feels like a performance you haven't rehearsed.
But the handbook provides the scripts, right from the Small Catechism. You say, I, a poor sinner, confess before God that I am guilty of many sins, and then you name the ones that are troubling you.
You get them out of your head and into the air.
That's the idea.
But here's the what if that I found really comforting. What if you can't think of a specific sin? Do you just make something up?
No, and the text is very firm on this. It says, and I love this line, we should not torture ourselves with imaginary sins.
Do not torture ourselves with imaginary sins. That's great life advice in general.
It is. If nothing specific is weighing on you, you just rely on the general confession. The point is honesty, not neuroticism. It's about removing obstacles, not creating new anxieties.
Okay, so we've gone through the 40 days. We've done the disciplines, used the worksheet. Now we arrive at the finale. The handbook calls it the Triduum.
Pronounced tridu. Tridu. It refers to the 3 sacred days, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, and the Great Vigil of Easter. But here is the critical concept the handbook explains, which I think most people miss.
What's that?
The Triduum is technically one continuous service.
It's like one service spread over 3 days.
Yes. If you look at the liturgy in the text, there are no benedictions, no formal go-in-peace closings between the services. It starts on Thursday evening and doesn't officially close until Easter Sunday morning.
That's wild. It's like a 3-act play where the curtain never really falls.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's walk through the 3 acts. Act 1, Maundy Thursday. Themes, love, and betrayal.
This is where the text describes the foot washing, the mandatum, or command to love. It's the Last Supper. But the visual shock comes at the end with the stripping of the altar.
The handbook describes this so vividly. The entire church is stripped bare. The text says this represents Christ being stripped of his power and glory.
You go from a celebration to this barren, empty space, and then everyone just leaves in silence.
Which leads directly into Good Friday.
Right. The atmosphere is silent, austere, no organ music. The focus is entirely on the adoration of the cross.
And this is where we have to talk about the Strepitus. I had never heard of this before. The text describes a service called Tenebrae, the service of shadow. Candles are put out one by one until it's dark, and then...
The Strepitus, it's a loud banging noise.
A bang.
The handbook says it's made to recall the earth quaking at Christ's death and the closing of the tomb.
Can you just imagine sitting in a dark, silent church and suddenly, bang? It's so visceral. You're not just reading about it. You're feeling the shock of it.
It creates a sensory experience of death, and it makes the silence that follows incredibly heavy. And that silence holds until the great vigil of Easter.
Act 3, the shift from darkness to light. The text says the congregation gathers outside around a new fire.
This is the ancient practice. You kindle a new fire to light the Paschal candle. Then you process in, breaking the darkness with this one single light.
And then they tell stories. The text mentions 12 readings that span the whole of salvation history. It's a marathon of storytelling.
It is.
And then the climax. The Alleluia returns. The colors brighten. The fast is officially broken.
And the handbook notes this is when the great feast begins. You fasted for 40 days, so now you feast for 50. The joy is amplified because of the discipline that came before it. You can't really understand the light unless you've sat in the darkness.
That really brings it all home.
Yeah.
What I take away from this whole source is that Lent isn't just some gloomy obligation, it's a structured journey. You can't really appreciate the feast unless you've felt the hunger.
Precisely. And the handbook frames it all as a safeguard against pride. There's a line in there that says, anonymity serves as a safeguard against pride.
Mm-hmm.
You do the discipline, you do the fasting, you do the works of love, but you don't brag about it. You don't post your water bowl on Instagram.
Right. It's an internal renovation, not an external performance.
And that anonymity allows the focus to remain on the relationship with God rather than on the approval of others, which is a refreshing perspective in a world that is so much about external validation.
It really is. It's a handbook for quieting down the noise and tuning into something much older and much deeper. Whether you follow the liturgy or just appreciate the psychology behind it, there's a lot of wisdom in this little booklet.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that discipline brings freedom and that sometimes you have to strip everything away to see what's really there.
Well, we have unpacked a lot today. Thank you for listening, and do subscribe to our channel for more. Try to get this book and read it. Be blessed.